In today's video, I'm going to show you my top tips for getting quick macro shots when you're out and about. In some of my recent videos, I've shown some of the techniques that I use to get macro shots when I am out in the field. But some of those techniques, while they are, I'd like to think, pretty good, they are quite labor intensive. They take time to set up. So today, it's all about speed. It's all about getting quick shots when you've maybe just got an hour before you've got to get your dinner on and you just want to get some nice shots. Well, hopefully I'll be able to show that you can still get some really nice macro images even when you're shooting really quickly. So just found this tiny ladybird just tucked into this dead leaf. I think it's a really nice shot. And I want to position the ladybird itself in the bottom third of the frame, so I've moved my focus point down there. Try and focus on it. It is quite difficult to do handheld. As a quick first snap, I quite like this. I use a slightly wider aperture of f5.6 to allow that front curl of the dead leaf to blur out, while the ridges of the leaf itself almost act as leading lines towards the ladybird. So tip 1, travel light. If I know I'm moving quickly, then I'll tend to use a messenger style bag like this one just here, so I can just grab my camera. I find that just having my camera accessible like that makes such a difference in the shots that I take. A lot of the time I have my camera gear in a big backpack and it's all zipped up, but I find that that can actually be quite a barrier to me using it, because anytime I see a shot I have to stop, take the bag off, unzip it, get all the gear out, and so I just find that I end up passing up on a lot of shots that I otherwise would take just because I can't really be bothered getting everything out of the bag. Halfway through that last sentence it just absolutely started hammering down with rain, so it's hood up. And I'm actually going to shelter in these trees for a little while. I actually don't mind rain for macro, because all of the leaves and all of the things that you're taking photos of will suddenly start to glisten and they become more vibrant and saturated with colour. You might even get some nice water droplets coming off those leaves. So, you know, it can rain all at once and I'll shelter here, and maybe I can get even better shots when I eventually leave this canopy. Moving quickly also means no tripod, because just like the backpack, getting your tripod out means unfolding the legs, getting it into the right position, making sure that all those legs are nice and even and balanced, and it just takes more time. Every shot that you want to take suddenly involves several minutes of setup, and for the same reason with the backpack, I just find that I end up passing up shots just because it would take more time to get it. This is a good example of a sort of shot that with a tripod I'd probably ignore, because I just love these three lighter coloured leaves. Everything's nice and glistening with the rain. It's not the sort of shot that I'd want to spend ages like composing, but by travelling light I can just snap away and then move on. And then there's this nice fern I saw, which worked nicely as a close one-to-one crop, and this vibrant ladybird. Neither of which are shots I might have bothered getting if it had taken ages to set up, but as quick snaps, I think they're pretty nice. I think it does come down to that thing sometimes, that having too much gear, instead of allowing you to be more creative, instead it literally weighs you down, and you don't take a lot of the shots that otherwise you might do. I like keeping my eye out for tiny details like this little vibrant green leaf against this red bark. It's not the most exciting photo, but I just think it really stands out, and I think it's a nice shot. I also like finding little leaves like this that can stand out from the background with shallow depth of field, or when it's raining like today, tiny water droplets forming at the end of the leaves. Hood down now. I think the rain is easing. I'm also carrying a speed light. Now, in my previous videos, I've talked a lot about using off-camera light and how that can add direction and contrast and dimension to your images. And while that is true, speed lights, as the name suggests, are pretty quick to use. So here is how I use them. So I've got my speed light on my camera and I've pointed it forwards, and as you can see, I've also got a modifier on the front. This is the MagMod MagSphere. That's just going to take the small bare bulb light source of the speed light, just make it a little bit bigger and softer, gives it a more natural look in the image. Here I found this little bug on a leaf, so I've played around with my settings a bit, but generally I'm at about f8 for sharpness, ISO 400 to brighten it up, and a shutter speed of a 25th of a second. That's really slow for handheld photos, but it's a fast burst of light coming from the speed light, so that will freeze the insect and look nice and sharp, but still let in enough light for a brighter background. Whereas this shot, I'd opened up the aperture wide to f2.8 to allow for that really shallow depth of field. Now, many macro enthusiasts would hate this as it's not sharp from front to back, but I do like shots like this. It's more of an artistic representation, I feel, than a scientific record of the insect, and as long as the eye's in sharp focus, then I'm happy. And the same can be true of other subjects too. So let's just take this tiny little flower here as an example. You can barely see it, and clearly in the background we've got all of this like messy leaves. It's a very, very complicated looking scene. Try not to hit the flower, Andy. And if I kept everything in focus, then this tiny little flower would not stand out at all. So this is an example where you'd want to use that shallow depth of field to make sure that just the flower is in focus and therefore is really the main subject in the image. You can see I'm getting my knees dirty here, and that is important. I want to get down on the same level of the insect to try and connect with it. Take this shot when it's just showing its back. A portrait of a person would not look good like this with their back turned away from you, but instead by moving lower down and changing your shooting position, as I've done in this shot, you allow your viewer to really feel like they're seeing the subject eye to eye. It's a small shift in position, but it makes a huge difference to the composition of your images. The scenes like this little thing here, where there is enough ambient light just about if you use your settings to get a decent shot, but adding in that extra little pop of flash just helps bring out those details, particularly when it's been raining and that little extra light coming from your flash just catches on some of those like reflective surfaces, and I think it really brings this shot to life. So I do think it's always worth carrying a small speed light like this, just in case. Of course, your settings completely depend on the conditions that you're in. If you are shooting under the bright midday sun, then of course you can probably get away with much faster shutter speeds, but if it's sort of nearer dusk or you're under a lot of trees like this and there's not a lot of light, then you will need to use slower shutter speeds, open up that aperture, or crank that ISO higher in order to compensate. But of course, moving quickly does have its downsides, chief among which is that it's more difficult to actually find those little macro details that you're looking for. So my advice is really limit the area that you're going to actually move through. If you do only have an hour, then maybe just try going to one small bit of your local park, or maybe it's just a handful of trees. If you don't get anything that time, then try a different handful of trees next time. I mean, I've just come to this little bit of sort of scrubby woodland which is just next to a footpath a few minutes away from where I live. I'm just basically walking back and forth through these trees, keeping my eye out and trying to find different shots. I love that little rain shower we've had has made everything all nice and slick and reflective and just looks a lot more vibrant. I do hope these tips will be useful next time you are out and about and you're trying to get some shots in a bit of a hurry. All of the techniques and tips that I have shown today are ones that I use when I'm out taking the same shots, and they're all things that I try and keep in mind every time I go out. If you have enjoyed this video, then do please give it a thumbs up and do consider subscribing to my channel if you don't already, and I will see you next time.